Now, let's go back over here and let's see how I calculated the individual scores for every coin. So I'm going to erase this for now, and we're going to recalculate them. But before we recalculate them, I'm going to assign each heads here a number. So H1, H2, H3, H4. These heads correspond with the heads in our domain there. And I'll do the same thing for the tails. So T1, T2. Now, every time I calculate the score, I'm going to write where that score came from. For H1, there are 0 tails to the left of it, so it's just 0. That's it. I have to write no pairs because its score is 0. But here for T1, we have this one head, specifically H1 to the left of it. So its score is 1, but where did I get this from? I got it from H1 being mapped with T1. So this little pair, H1 and T1, results in T1 having a score of 1. Now we have H2 over here. There is one tail, specifically T1 to the left of H2. So this also has a score of 1. And how did it get this 1 from? Well, it got it from this T1, so I'm going to write that pair down as well. I'm going to write H2, T1. And I don't really care about the order. It's just a pair. So T1, H1, H1, T1, same thing, doesn't matter. Moving on to H3, there's just T1 to the left of it. That's the only tails. So its score is also just 1. And it got this one from T1. So I'm going to write the pair H3, T1 below. H3, T1. Now T2, it has 3 heads to the left of it. H1, H2, and H3. So its score is 3. And how exactly did it get the score of 3? Well, 1 from H1, so I'm going to write the pair T2, H1. 1 from H2, so T2, H2. And the last one from H3, so I'm going to write T2, H3. I'm just going to spread this out so it doesn't get too messy. Okay. And my N is 6. Doing the same thing for H4, I have 2 tails to the left of it, specifically T1 and T2. So it has a score of 2, and it gets one of those from T1, so H4, T1, and H4, T2. Actually, I just realized I wrote the tails here first. Just to be consistent, I'm going to switch up the order. Now we have a bunch of pairs here, and we also have a bunch of pairs there. Right now you probably are still confused. You're like, what's the connection here? Well, now I'm going to explain it. This, is all of the possible pairs when we map every single heads with every single tail. So at most, all of these pairs can show up here. I'm going to go through this list one by one, and for every pair that shows up here, I'm going to circle it. So H1T1, to start off with H1T1, does it show up here? Well, yeah, it shows up right here, H1T1. And does it show up anywhere else? Let's see. The only 2 possible places the pair H1T1 can show up under is either under the coin H1 or under the coin T1. because I was writing down the pairs and including the coin above it in all of the pairs underneath it. So if I see under H1, there are no pairs there, so this only shows up once and only once. Now do the same thing for H1, T2. Does it show up here? Well, it can show up either under H1, but there's nothing under H1. So let's check under T2. T2 is here. It does show up. So both these show up. Now I'm just going to run through this. H2, T1. Does it show up under H2? Yep, it does. Let's see if it shows up under T1. Nope, it does not. So it only shows up once and exactly once as well. H2, T2. It shows up once and only once, and that's under T2. H3, T1. Yep, that shows up once and only once under H3 here. H3, T2. Yep, that shows up once and only once under T2. I think you're getting the hang of this now. H4, T1. That shows up right here. And lastly, H4, T2. Shows up once and only once here. As you can see, the total number of pairs equals the total number of, equals the sum of the scores of the individual coins here. That should be clear because for every pair I got, I added 1 to the score of that coin. But what's also really interesting is that the total number of pairs here equals the total number of pairs here. And the total number of pairs here equals the number of heads times the number of tails. So the total number of heads times tails equals 4 times 2, which is 8. So the total number of pairs here equals 8. And as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are also 8 pairs here. With each pair here mapping once and exactly once to each pair here. And as follows, if I add up these scores for every single coin, I get 0 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2, which is equal to 8. Now, it's no coincidence that the sum of the scores equals the number of heads times the number of tails. I'm going to go through a very brief proof, nothing rigorous over here, but I just want to explain why that happens and that it's no coincidence. Like, it's not like I just chose a sequence to show to you guys in which it happened.